Hello, everyone. My name is Maya Danova. I'm part of Nicanor, which is a vet center in Sofia, in Bulgaria. Our vet center is one of the board members and one of four partners that established Let Harin network. And we are really glad that we have the chance today to organize one of our set of webinars, I could say, under Let Harin network. Today, Gabriele Uzo from Istituto de Sordi di Torino will. Okay, I'm admitting people, so sorry. Okay, will tell us more about accessibility. Also, I would like to announce that we are organizing next webinars. The next one will be on the 21st of May at 11 set, and we will talk about artificial intelligence. It will be organized by Let Harin, but it will be led by Alison Blaney, which is from Gifted Ireland. She's also one of the members of Let Harin, and we'll be very happy if you could join us again. And if we have more participants, we will start promoting and next week, so after Easter holidays. And now, Gabriel.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Maya. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen, my presentation. Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you again for the brief introduction. And as Maya was saying, today I'll be talking about accessibility. A little bit about myself. I am an accessibility manager, which means that I supervise, I coordinate projects related to accessibility, and then shortly we will look into what it actually means accessibility. Especially for people with sensory disabilities that especially in culture projects, museums, so culture and museums projects related to accessibility and the trainer. So training on new generations with accessibility. I did finish my PhD a couple of years ago, and it was about subtitles for the deaf and the hard of hearing in the context of film festivals. So I come from a linguistic background, so you would say that linguistic accessibility is my sort of specialty. And I was interested into finding what deaf people need or want when it comes to subtitles or captions in the context of film festivals. Before that, did a master's in audiovisual translation, which is the one that sort of gave me the boost to pursue this career in accessibility, or gave me the idea of what accessibility is. So it has been a few years, I guess, 15 since that moment. So, and as we will see later on, accessibility is always a process. There's always something to learn, and I'm happy to start a conversation with you or to hear your feedback on my talk today. So, starting with the agenda for today, starting with the what it actually means, the importance of ongoing inclusion, an overview of key legislations, because likely everything that we do is sort of like framed within legislations, so both at national, international, and global level, I'd say. We'll continue with some basic definitions and concepts, especially because accessibility is a word that has been used quite a lot and is still used quite a lot. So it's good to have a bit of understanding of what it actually means, but it could also mean different things for different people. So then I'll just give you some basic definitions again. We'll talk about the multiple dimensions of accessibility, because we will see the accessibility can mean different things to different people. Okay.
Okay.
And then we will be closing with some closing thoughts and what are the next steps. Again, if you have any feedback or comments, they are more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Accessibility and inclusion, ensuring equitable access. So this is a bit of an overview on how to make products, services, and environment accessible to everyone. This is sort of like a basic definition of what accessibility could be. And then again, the definition of what products are, or the different products is, and the difference between products and services and the environment, and what it actually means accessibility and who is everyone. So this sentence is a bit of a definition, but then it could actually mean different things again. There's an emphasis on the benefits for all users. Studies have shown that if one particular group, usually people with disabilities, usually disadvantaged people or people with disadvantages, whatever services and provision of accessible services and products. These are also beneficial for other people, which could be considered mainstream or the majority. Then there is integration of legal and ethical frameworks. And we'll discuss it a bit later on. So the key principle of nothing about us without us. It involves the active participation of those directly affected. Affected here is both as a positive sense or a negative sense. And whenever we say nothing about us without us, we as I'm talking from my point of view that I'm a person without disabilities. I am a hearing and sighted person. It should be more nothing about them without them, because I'm not a person with disabilities. But then this is the motto of the disability movement that involves that sort of moves beyond the charitable approach towards a genuine collaboration. There should be nothing about people with disabilities without the involvement of the people who are directly interested in that. So without the involvement of people with disabilities. And this sort of applies to diverse groups and they're seeking representation. Representation is another word that we'll look into that and what it actually means. It has been said in many, actually in a few conferences that I've attended, that people like myself, I'm not sure if the audience is also the same. So people who are sighted, people who are hearing, people without disabilities, they've been talking a lot or discussing a lot about disabilities and accessibilities. So this is something that we, as people who don't have disabilities, we've been sort of colonization or colonizing the movement. The reality, perhaps, I mean, I'm not going to get into the detail of that, but the reality perhaps is that if it's a genuine collaboration between people who have different background, who understand different aspects of accessibility, in collaboration with people with disabilities, perhaps this is a genuine or virtuous circle that can generate actually something good. There are a lot of people out there who sort of like pretend that they know and pretend they are interested, but they're not. I guess that is also something that the movement was referring to. Then again, I'm speaking from a point of view of a person who is a hearing person, sighted, and without disabilities. The ongoing inclusive process states that accessibility is never finished. As we do accessibility, we evolve, and in the sense that we learn new things are created, invented. More recently, artificial intelligence. More recently, if you're talking like few years, let's say decades, technology has evolved drastically or very rapidly. So then the incorporation of technologies and specifically artificial intelligence in recent applications of accessibility is something very important. But at the same time, people change. As in the generation that we're in today, it's not the same generation that it was 30 years ago, previous generation and before that. So the same way that languages changes with society and culture, the same goes for accessibility. It should be a case of regular feedback and updates to maintain relevance. The feedback is, of course, between those who do and those who have who benefit from that, I would say. And then, as we were saying, technology and social norms evolves, therefore we should adapt to the evolving scenario. I'm going to give you some legislations, which, if you're joining us from different part of the world, of course, will apply to yours as well. There's usually national level of legislation. In Italy is Law 104 of 1992. That sort of frames or gives a national framework for accessibility. Then there's European level, which would refer to one of the most important legislation or piece of legislation, which is the European Accessibility Act, not so long ago. And then a more global level is one of the pieces of document that is usually cited is the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. This convention states many things, or it says many things about people with different disabilities. So it's a very important piece of information and document to read and to sort of like understand as well. Then, of course, there's the compliance from ethical and legal duty. We'll talk about some basic vocabulary. Accessibility, as I was saying, is a word that's been used and overused and perhaps abused also in recent years, and then it means different things to different people. It's usually misunderstood with inclusion, but then from my point of view, which is the one shared also by other scholars, this is sort of like different, there are differences between them. So we start with the basic vocabulary or the progress of identity, diversity, representation, and disability. So identity means that the personal traits reshaping self-perception. I identify as a male, therefore I'm a man. You identify as female, so then therefore your identity is what makes you. But then you identify also as Spanish. I identify as an Italian because I'm Italian. So identity is what makes us, basically. Diversity is the recognition of a variety of backgrounds, abilities, and ideas. People are different. Even the few people that are here, meaning compared to is that 8 billion that we are now, something like that. There's a variety in backgrounds in abilities, which means, of course, abilities and disabilities, and ideas. And this is what causes the diversity of identities. Then there is representation, now, which is the inclusion of different voices in decision making. I'm just going to give you an example. In terms of number, women are not a minority, as in women and men, generally speaking, in the world, it's something like 50-50. I think it's 53%, 47%. So therefore, we can't really say women are a minority. However, story will tell us that there has been an underrepresentation of women in many aspects of society because they're not considered to be capable, of decision-making processes up until recent feminist movement, so up until probably last century. So up until then, that doesn't mean that women were a minority. For example, deaf people are a minority because there are less deaf people than hearing people. That's statistics. But they were just underrepresented. Disability is an interaction between diverse abilities and non-inclusive environment. So there's no disability as such. Disability only occurs when there is an environment that is not inclusive. So this is how disability sort of starts. Going back to representation, I don't know if you have seen recent remakes of films and TV series where perhaps something like, okay, I'm going to talk about the Disney ones. There's been a lot of talking about The Little Mermaid being dark skin, or Cinderella, there was Latina, or remakes of Hocus Pocus, the film, or other films and TV series where they were done sort of like 20, 30 years ago, and there was a representation of mainstream or majority. Therefore, most people were white, most people were binary people, most people were people without disabilities. Whereas in remakes of the same film or the same TV series, so that doesn't mean that it's a representation of, I don't know, something related to Black history or Black communities. There's a variety or a diversity, a recognition of diversity, which leads to representation. We could also see that for deaf people that have been more represented, let's say that. But then again, representation of all the diversities means that there should be a cast of people with different identities. And if we combine all the different identities, perhaps we will need a cast of many, many people. So then this is a bit of how representation works in the media industry, for example. Then another concept or vocabulary is the one related to accessibility, inclusion, barriers, and discrimination. So accessibility is to ensure equitable use for everyone. I don't know if you've seen it. I didn't want to bring any pictures on this slide. I just want to have a little bit of a chat. But there is a picture going on, or an image going on of the three people. One is a man, one is a boy, and one is a younger boy. And they are sort of like in front of a fence. And they want to have a look at the football field, which is behind. So then the differences between providing a stool, one stool per person, which means this is equity. We provide the same thing to everyone. However, the taller person can already see, the medium-sized person or the boy can see better now, and then the little boy can't see because one stool is not enough. So then if we don't provide the same thing for everyone, but if we provide things that are needed for specific people, we will provide more stools for the shorter person, for the boy. Therefore, all three can see. Newer development would question other things, and then this picture again, and I didn't want to again bring all these varieties of pictures, is who built the fence? Why is there a fence? This is one of the questions of if we want to ensure equitable use and equitable access to everyone, why is there a fence in the first place? And it's the same thing that is related to colonial studies, as in people of color will now have, let's say, a seat at the table, but then the question is who built the table? Why is there a table and who built it? So is the inclusion of certain diversities, but then again, who includes who? It's also a question that is still very much open. As we were saying, the discussion is still open, and then the more we progress or we bring in more ideas, the more we evolve also in understanding what this all means and what it means in reality or in practice. Another definition would be inclusion, which is the redesigning spaces and processes to remove obstacles. Redesigning spaces and processes to remove obstacles may sound a bit drastic. I don't know if you're in a city which is very, say, old. I live in Palermo at the moment, and it's an historical city like most European cities, and most of the buildings are not accessible just because they were built hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. So then doesn't mean that we should tear everything down, all the buildings, and just build new things. That doesn't mean that. It means, on the one hand, if we're building something new, think about that. Let's think about accessibility. And if we don't want to, of course, tear down or old buildings, let's make them accessible through a provision of access services. So it's just being reasonable in the sense that there is history, although it was flooded, of course, but still it was a history of not tearing down old buildings. Common sense, I guess. Barriers, which is the one we're talking about, they are physical, digital, or attitudinal elements that excludes. Physical barriers are the one there is people think of when we talk about accessibility. The person in a wheelchair cannot access certain place because there are steps. That's the main one. Nowadays, digital accessibility is very important just because, well, everything is digital now. So then we also want to think about the digital divide, which separates younger generations from older generation, and that being a part of or a cause for discrimination. Um, and attitudinal in the sense that the way we think or the way we perceive things can also be understood as a way of creating barriers. Prejudice, for example, is a barrier or attitudinal barrier. Discrimination would be the practice of the limit participation based on disability. Based on disability will be the main cause of this conversation we're having today. But the discrimination is a practice that is the limits participation based on different things as well. It could be gender, sexual orientation, background, color of your skin, etc. Another vocabulary that I want to sort of give you is the concept of universal design and design for all. Universal design is considered to be an environment or environments that are usable by all with minimal adaptation. So when we design things, which could be things as small as a pen to things as big as building, or a website or a museum or anything really, they should be usable, which means many things, by all, by everyone, and there should be minimal adaptation. Design for all is a mainstream solution that accommodates a broad range of needs. Think of the fact, for example, if you're left-handed, all the cutlery, or not cutlery, but all utensils for the kitchen are designed for right-handed people. Or if you're left-handed, I guess Maya's shaking, so she's left-handed. I'm left-handed as well. Uh,
No, but my husband and my children, they are also left-handed, so I know what you mean.
Exactly. So it's the designing of something that were designed because the majority of people are because statistics say that they are right-handed. Therefore, everything is built around them, which cause us some problems, and we should adapt. For example, there's also, and the level of adaptation depends on your needs, first of all, and what you want, how you want to adapt or not. For example, there are mouses for left-handed people, which I don't use myself, because I just grew up with the mouse for for normal people or for right-handed people, so I'm used to that. And some of the utensils that I use in the kitchen, just because they are expensive to buy the left one, I can't really find them. I got used to it and it's fine. But then perhaps the designing of kitchen utensils, they're not either for left-handed or right-handed would be the definition of universal design. Doesn't matter which one is your dominant hand, you could use this utensil. And then there's specialized aids. So there's the supplemental measures when necessary. That is simply because universal design and design for all does not really cater for everyone. The aim is to cater for everyone, but that is virtually impossible or utopic. And there are people who need with special needs, let's say that require special services. Um, and therefore they should be sort of like added when, if and when they're necessary. I'd like to talk to you about accessibility as something, but before that, just give me 1 second. Sorry, we're just getting too hot. Accessibility can be considered as we're saying different things. Consider accessibility as a lens. So either a magnifying lens or a lens, a camera lens. It's the same thing that we're looking at a garden, a building, a museum, but then we put on this lens before between our eyes and the object. So this is something that um, researchers have put forth is the idea that accessibility can be understood as a lens in the sense that it changes our perspective and it focus on something of that particular object. Building, for example, imagine there's a lens that sort of reveals all the stairs that there are in this building and whether or not these stairs or the floor that they lead to are accessible. So it's a way of thinking of the same thing and the same product and the same service just from different eyes. Then there's accessibility as numbers. Some other researchers have thought that accessibility could be understood as sort of like a grading system. I imagine the grading system going from 0 to 10. The provision of accessibility measures is not understood as a 10, but it's understood as a 6, which is the bare minimum to pass. So when we have, for example, a museum or a place of culture that does not have sign language interpreting or doesn't have subtitles or it doesn't have a ramp, and we provide that, we didn't make it accessible. We just brought it from a 2 to a 6. So before it was either 0 or 2 or very low number, and with the provision of accessibility features, we brought it to a 6, which is the bare minimum. But there is a lot between 6 and 10, which is the good practices and going above and beyond, as we would say, of accessibility, which sort of like then leads to inclusion. It's the same way of thinking of the example of the man, the boy, and the little boy with the stool, who built the fence in the first place. So why is there a fence? By the same way of the museum, why is the museum about something that's not relevant to a lot of people, for example? Or why not include or change complete perspective of a museum and to bring it from a 6 to a 7, 8, or 9 or a 10? And there is accessibility as an interdisciplinary approach. Think of all the faculties of a university. We have medicine, I think, like medicine, architecture, languages, engineering, law, what else? They should all have either a course or a module on accessibility because that applies to all of them. Again, this is also like the main ones I would say. Think of accessibility in architecture is what we were saying before, the physical elimination of barriers or the designing of buildings that does not require sort of like adjustment later on. In the terms of medicine, that's also very important. Languages, it's my background. Sign languages should be included in curricula, but also subtitles or captions or audiovisual accessibility and linguistic accessibility, and we'll see what it is shortly, is something that should be considered and brought into these faculties. Law, because of course the legislations, someone needs to write this legislation. So if they know what accessibility is, then they can sort of like become the lawyers or the judges or politicians of the future that they will shape accessibility in a different way. So imagine a conference that is held at your local university and that all faculties could participate because everyone will bring something from their own different fields, and it might not be interesting for students of architecture to learn about law, accessibility in law, but it's something that is somehow interconnected because the collaboration between all these people who will become at later stage in the life consultant or accessibility manager or something else, then this is something that, of course, we sort of like envision to be a good practice. There are different types of accessibility, and this is a multidimensional approach. I've listed some of the most not important, but they are more sort of like grouped together. Sorry. Physical accessibility is the provision, of course, of features to physical spaces. That includes ramps or wide pathways or accessible restrooms. And that, in the light of or with universal design in mind, is something that is, again, enjoyable by everyone. Think of accessible bathrooms. I don't know if you've ever been to an accessible bathroom before. They're larger and wider to accommodate a wheelchair user. These are also good if you're a person with 3 to 4 to 5 children, and they all need to go sort of like to the restroom, and then you have your bag, and then you have your pram, and then you have other things. So this is a place where your family can go at the same time. And imagine again if you're a mother or father of 3 or 4, good luck with that. But then again, you need to sort of like accommodate. So this is something that was designed for people in a wheelchair, but it's also usable for other people in different situations. They're not in a situation of disabilities or disadvantage. In that particular moment, they are in need, or it would be good to have something around. I don't know if you ever pushed a trolley or a pram in in the streets of your city, and you wish that ramps or so like the pavement were so leveled, and it was again leveled. I was walking with my friend who just had a baby, and I never realized how uncomfortable it is for the streets of Palermo because they're not accessible. I always thought, well, I'm not in a wheelchair. I don't really know people, friends who have in a wheelchair, until my mother was in a wheelchair, and I realized that, okay, so this is really not accessible. But then again, just a friend, meaning like a friend having a baby, and I thought, okay, this would be easy. But then walking around was something that was like a 5 minute walk for me that took us 20 minutes, going up and down and then taking different roads, etc., etc. Ramps is considered one of the sort of like most universal access. To know if you have seen the ramp that there is at, I think it's the Guggenheim Museum or the MoMA Museum in New York. So it's a spiral that goes around in the middle. The ramp is considered to be very good for people with physical disabilities. If you're in a wheelchair, if you are in what's it called, the stroller, but also if you're blind, because you just follow a path that you don't really have steps, so that's easier. But also if you're deaf, because you're signing to your friend and then you don't really look in where you're going. So then instead of having steps, you just follow the ramp. So then you just feel that the ramp is under you and then it goes leveled. So it's easier. It's good if you're in a group. It's good if you're older. So it's really good if in different situations that is not specifically just for people in a wheelchair, which is the one that was originally designed for. Then we have communication accessibility, which is a communication of plain language and multiple formats. We will look into that shortly as well. Plain language is also being called easy to read language or simple language or plain language. It's just a way of saying things the way they are. We like to think that the more sort of like mysterious or the more words that are not really common you use, the more educated and smart you are. So whenever we talk to a lawyer, then we want to feel they want not they, usually, the feeling is that they will use some terms that are specific for them, so then you don't understand them. And if you don't understand them, you need them to explain them to you, or better yet, or worse yet, you don't need to understand. They are there for you. They are there because they are the lawyers, they are the doctors. So they will tell you things that you don't understand, but they do because they've been to med school or law school. Whereas I don't really know how it works, how the body works. I mean, I'm not a medic, but then if you tell me that there's something wrong with my blood, and I know what the blood is, and then I can understand if I have something wrong, for example. And then the communication through multiple formats is a concept that sort of like provides people with the choice of preferring to having the information or getting the information through different channels. Whether I want to read it, I want to listen to it, and I want to see it or touch it. And I'm saying that from again from a point of view of a sighted and hearing person, but then a deaf person will not only prefer to see it, but it would be required, as in like they can hear. Digital accessibility, and again, today has been is very important, and it is related to all websites, apps, and documents that meet accessibility standards. There are more websites basically these days than there are people, I guess. There are lots of websites, lots of apps are created, and before they didn't really meet accessibility standards because the majority of people did not have disabilities or don't have disabilities, therefore they're built for them. But the digital accessibility relates, and there are legislations, of course, on that, think that they should be accessible to everyone. Then there's audiovisual accessibility, something a bit more focusing on what I do, which relates to the provision of subtitles, audio description, and sign language interpreting. And then there's economic accessibility, which is the reduction of cost or free access wherever possible. It's something that we say in some languages. I don't know if it's applicable to your languages as well, but then if something is inaccessible, it means that it's also inexpensive. Like a car that costs, I don't know what's expensive, that 100,000 euros, that's inaccessible, meaning it's expensive. So the majority of people do not have 100,000 euros to buy a car, therefore it's inaccessible. Planning for accessibility early. This is something very important because the integration of accessibility from the start reduces the cost later. This 100% proven. The consultation with people who have disabilities for real insight is something that will, it's the same way of instead of doing something, ask whether or not it was done correctly, ask the people involved before, and then see, and then sort of like design it. And then the regularly assess and update of accessibility features, make sure that we are sort of like keeping up with the evolution of technology and artificial intelligence these days. There's a really nice quote from Salvam that I usually use with clients, and is that if accessibility is only remembered as an afterthought or late in the planning or design process, it always becomes less effective for the user, more difficult for the designer or contractor, and more costly for the owner. And this is something, again, I use with clients whenever they say, I have a project that has already been approved and we're working on it. Now we need to do accessibility. Can you help us? Well, now is too late. You should have consulted us or me before, not now, because now it's going to be exactly as it is. It's going to be less effective for the user because we cannot even integrate everything that we wanted to integrate. It's going to be more difficult for us to do because we need to adjust or adapt to what is already being approved, and it's going to cost you more. This is as simple as that. Of course, they don't understand that, but then this is the normal for like daily life, I guess. Communication accessibility is the provision of information. It's again in different formats, and it could be text, audio, and visual forms, and is to train staff to be aware and productive, and the use of clear, straightforward language across platforms. This is something that we Italians struggle with because our science or language likes to be complicated. We like to complicate things with language. We like to be very articulated and not really being accessible to everyone. On the other hand, for example, English is a more plain and direct language, which I quite like. It tells you things as they are, whereas Italian just sort of like goes around things. For the physical and structural accessibility, and as we were saying, the barrier-free entrances and corridors, accessible restrooms with adequate space and fixtures. And there's also consideration for quiet or low sensory areas for those needing calmer environments. Have you ever been to a museum, big museum, think of Prado or Louvre or any big museum, British museum, that if you are a person without disabilities, you would like to have a chair, you would like to have a bench to sit on, because after you walking around for 2 or 3 hours, admiring the beautiful paintings and all that, you just feel tired. So then having sitting disseminated throughout the museum is something that is not only beneficial for people without disabilities, but it's sort of like needed for people who get tired quite often for different reasons, for elderly people, for people with children, for a different variety of people really. So make the space, I think, make the space more human. Think of all the chairs and armchairs and sofa you have at home, just because, I mean, I guess your home is not as big as a museum, but then you still have chairs and beds and sofas, just because sometimes you want to sit and relax and then do something while you're doing that. It's the same thing. Then there's staff training and awareness. It's an ongoing education on disability and inclusive approaches. This is something that we usually include in our projects. It's simply because rather than there's a saying that give them a fish, and they'll eat for a day, teach them to fish and they will eat for the rest of their lives. So instead of providing something because you just came into some money and then you want to do something nice, we can also give you some advice on how to continue this, because otherwise, unless you want to go to us for the rest of your life, which is economically nice, but then perhaps unsustainable, you want to learn also how to do things the right way or accessible way. So then the training is something that does not make you an expert, does not make you a consultant, does not make you a trainer, but then it gives you the input to continue doing things the right way. It also empowers staff to make quick adaptation for user needs, because unless we do, of course, training that related to what do you do if a deaf person comes to your place of work and then they want to ask for something, and then we can tell them about the deaf community, we can tell them about the deaf culture, we can teach them sign language and everything else. But then what if the solutions are sort of like catered to different people? We can't really cover the whole spectrum of different abilities or diversities that there are out there. So then staff can also make decisions or quick adaptation for the user needs. It was very interesting when I was accompanying a consultant who is blind to place of culture and museum. And then the first thing that they did was offering a chair. So then I went there, like this is her, she's our consultant. We were today to do like a survey. Okay, here's the chair. We didn't ask for a chair. Like, I don't know, I usually when I see blind people, I offer them a chair. Like, well, no, I'm not, thank you, but I'm not tired. I mean, maybe offer me a glass of water, perhaps, because we just went on the third floor or something else. So something that, of course, the quick adaptation of knowing or understanding who your audience is, make sure that whenever you're talking to a deaf person, you do not cover your mouth or you just, give them the shoulders because perhaps they can leave read. And also encourages a culture of respect and continuous improvement. And that goes sort of like on all levels. So we usually like to train or teach or give this sort of like presentations or talks to different people within the organization, from the very top to the very bottom or vice versa. Because the very bottom, meaning like people perhaps even ushers or people who be dealing with the audience, where they are the people will be facing, as in like, be in front of them. But also at top level, they're the decision-making people. So then whenever they want to either think of something or have an idea, it's good to have from the top people to the middle management to the lower people, and having a bit of training for everyone. And then, as we were saying, there is economic accessibility, and is the consideration of discount or free services for underserved groups. And this is also a way to sort of like engage your audience. If there is something that is not accessible, again, the example of a car is a bit extreme, but then a museum, for example, I'm just referring to museums. I've been working with museums a lot lately. If you ask for 35 euros for to visit a museum, then it's very nice, but not many people will go because 35 euros for a museum is a lot. Even for the best museum. Some of the best museums actually free. So perhaps consider economic accessibility for people who are in disadvantage. People from poor neighborhoods don't go to places of culture because they think they are expensive. And perhaps 35 euros is also a lot. It's a lot for me as well. But even like a couple of euros, which could be nothing for us, it's considered to be something that they can't afford, one, or two, they don't really think it's only 2 euros because there's 2 euros plus something else. So they usually go for like, I don't want to go because um, it's going to be expensive. A way to go around it is to partner with agencies or sponsors to offset the cost. There are many associations, there are many agencies, and there are governmental sort of like parties that could be involved. Excuse me. To sort of like sponsor or offer discounts, because I understand that the cost, of course, of doing something, if it doesn't fall on the end user, it falls on someone else. That I understand. And also it's also a way to ensure wider reach and community inclusion. We're saying people that from poor neighborhoods don't really go to museums because they don't know that it's only 2 euros, for example. Technological accessibility, the one is on site, is related to, for example, free and reliable Wi-Fi to support personal assistive technology. But it's also a way, again, to provide people with a comfortable environment. Think of when you're going abroad, and then nowadays in Europe doesn't really matter, but then in places where you don't have your own Wi-Fi or your own internet on your phone, and then you still need to send text, an important text, a place where it's welcoming and it lets you charge your phone, for example, charging station, for example, as we were saying, or use the Wi-Fi. It's also something that makes you feel comfortable. So then you're more lean to use it or to access the place. Again, charging station for the mobility and the communication devices is important, as well as public computer with screen reader software that's specific again for blind people. Digital access, an overview in the sense that is not on site, is related to the adherence to guidelines like the WCAG, which is the guidelines for digital accessibility in relation to websites. The provision of accessibility statement or page, which is a law in Italy, and if I'm not mistaken, is a law in a lot of places in Europe, where you sort of tell how accessible your website and your site is from a different perspective. It is accessible for deaf people because of this, and it's not accessible to blind people because of this, and that. So I just gives you the statement. And there's a test for keyboard navigation and screen reader compatibility, which is again something that is more beneficial to blind people. The website accessibility tools, there are many out there. Of course, it's always good to ask someone who's at least knowledgeable of these things. But there are automated plugins as a which is a starting point, that creates the features that make a website accessible. There's a dedicated accessibility section with the user instructions, and that's also a way to engage more with the audience. As we were saying, a lot of people with disabilities do not really engage because they know for a fact that these places are not accessible. People who are deaf don't go to cinemas, usually speaking, generally speaking, because they know that they don't have captions or subtitles. It's always been like that. It's been like that for years. So unless there's something new, I'm not even gonna bother and check the new website of the cinema because everything is always the same. And this has been more historical situation. There's been sort of like, yeah, historically sort of like brought forward to where we are now. Therefore, we think that it is not possible to access the cinema because they don't have captions. Um, Another way of providing accessibility on site is the accessibility maps or floor plans when relevant. And it again, it's useful for certain people, but it's also good for other people. The 3D map or the braille map of the museum or other places of culture, it's good for blind people, but also good for people without disability. They sort of like give you the sort of like general feeling of what the space is like. Imagine you go to this big and huge museum. Do you ever get lost in a museum just because you don't have a map? And having a map with you will sort of make you understand where you are, so then you can plan ahead, or you can plan what you want to see, what you don't want to see, and you don't want to waste time in something that you're not interested in. Audiovisual accessibility, well, subtitles or captions for all video content. That's sort of like what brings the two to a six. So it's again the bare minimum to have subtitles. Sign language interpreting or sign languages whenever possible. That's again another number that goes close to five or six or seven. Another description for visual elements, it's also something that should be again the bare minimum or the essential of audiovisual accessibility. Partnering for accessibility is something again of how to make these things possible. It's to seek government grants or nonprofit support. There are lots of projects, including European projects, that sort of like have a specific eye for accessibility. We all know that. It's the collaboration with user organization for feedback, which is something that we also know because we collaborate with end users all the time, and is exploring alliances with tech companies or institutions. Institutions is also related to universities, just because, of course, most of the research comes from university. But the tech companies are the one who make things happen in a way. So then they are the one developing the software or the app. So then they're also good to have on your site. Then there is a connection with the signage or wayfinding, and it's related to high contrast and clear font, because if you don't really see the signage, then you're lost again. Having braille or tactile overlays for key signage, and this helps, sorry about the dog, and it helps with people who are blind to navigate where they are or understanding the space, and validation with actual users to ensure clarity, because again, something that we say in front of you or next to that I don't know if you ever asked where the bathroom is. It's usually at the end of the corridor to the right. Wherever you go, it's usually where they put the bathroom. And then that means again different things, because the corridor is usually not straight, but then it's zigzag or something, and it's never to the right, but it's usually how they design it. Text accessibility is related to, of course, the description of text, and it sort of indicates or suggests to keep the text concise with bullet points or short paragraphs. I've been doing, for example, in my slides, where you see the slides as bullet points, you can see it, and then I'm discussing it with you. Is the inclusion of headings and subheadings for logical structures. We have a title, a subtitle, and another subtitle. So what's the most important thing? What's the middle thing? And what's the big thing? And is the test readability using tools or user feedback? And then another point of readability and the visual contrast is the color contrast using online tools. We think that usually we think that making something a very bright color or very nice color is nice, but then it's really not really accessible in a way. I was doing my sign language course from this desk. And then my background, for example, which has the map, was not really accessible in the sense that you can't really see when I'm signing because I don't have a background. Sophia, for example, has many books in the back. That's a bit distracting if you were doing a language course. Um, then again, if you're not, then it's absolutely fine. And having a background when you're doing Zoom, that's why most interpreters or interpreters will have a green screen or a blue screen. That makes things a bit easier. Is to maintain consistent layout and clear headings. That means that, for example, even in the slide, you don't really change the layout. You don't make something, appear and disappear. Also very nice, but then it's not really accessible. And use a sufficiently large font, for example, size 12 or 14. That depends, of course, how big your slide is or your text is. Formatting and layout is the consideration to align the text to the left and avoid heavy justification. This is something that I usually struggle with academic papers because we think that academic papers should be justified. So then it should be like that. That makes it very nice, very neat, very precise. And then we were writing or discussing about accessibility. So accessibility is this, this, and this, and then we want to do that. And then the text we format is justified, which is inaccessible. So this is a bit ironic in a way. The text should be aligned to the left, and that is to the benefit of people who are dyslexic, because the space between characters or words should be natural, not forced, because some words, some characters like M, O, or A are bigger than I or L. So then each character should take their own proportional space. Use a white space to separate sections for clarity, that's obvious, and limit the use of italics, underlining, and all caps for different reasons, readability, of course, but it's also a way to avoid making something a bit heavier to read. The odd word is in italics or underline or all caps is perhaps okay, but having a full text that is either in italics or underlined, it just makes it very unpleasant to read or difficult to read. From the point of view of linguistic accessibility, we should stick to common vocabulary and avoid unnecessary jargon. If you want to include the jargon, then perhaps you can include this is also a way of not diminishing the specificity of certain things. And this is something that we do, for example, in audio description, when we don't want to diminish the general overview of the film, we use the jargon and then we describe it. For example, if there's a woman doing a ballet and she does a plie, not everybody knows what a plie is. You will say that she's doing a plie, comma, bending the knees towards the outwards and then going up again. Or he takes I don't know, a hammer. A hammer is very common, but perhaps any tool is not really common. Then you use it as it is, and then you describe what it is. Because many people, of course, never seen a specific tool or never used a specific tool, and unless you ever done ballet, then you don't really know what a plie is. Is the provision of explanations or definitions for specialized terms, which is what we discussed, and the consistent terminology to reduce confusion. Now, once you introduce the terms, for example, the term plié, then the next time you don't have to say it again, but then we know what it is. And then if you're using two words that are synonyms, just stick to one, because then otherwise we create confusion. Again, we like to use, especially in Italian, use synonyms. It's a way of enriching our language to show that we know more words. But perhaps if you use that same word, then it's easier for people to understand. If you want to show off that you know more words, write about it, but also don't. Assistive technology and compatibility, well, of course, is the offering documents in multiple formats, HTML, accessible PDF, Word, etc. Provide alternative text for images and diagrams. And that is, again, a topic that has been discussed with many clients when do I need to provide alternative text for every single image of my website? And the answer is usually no. There are some descriptive images that only require descriptive images. But then if you understand why alt text is there and what is it for, then you can also use your judgment or common sense when creating or changing the website. And that goes again hand in hand with a training or education of people who work on the website, because they will be updating their own website for sure. Is to ensure also the keyboard only navigation is possible. And then structuring information logically. So organize the text in a clear and sequential steps. Avoid assuming prior knowledge and give context when needed. It's again related to the fact that we are different people with different identities. Not everyone has a PhD, not everyone is educated, not everyone knows other languages or even their own language. Not everybody uses that particular language as their main form of communication. Let's put it like that. Not everybody reads. Not everybody wants to read. Not everybody has general knowledge, which is something that I don't know, comes with experience, I guess, and yes, experience. So, for example, if you have traveled a lot, then you have seen different things in the world, and you would know where China is, even if you've never been to China, because you at least you've seen a map. We should never assume that people understand or some people know where China is, just because they've never looked at a map. Simple as that. I was having this conversation with my nephew who is 8. So this is justifiable because he's very young and he doesn't know where things are. So when I told him I was traveling, like I'm going to this place. And where is that? Just because he doesn't know, of course, geography or he's never studied it. But then again, he doesn't really have map at home. So then it's something that their family, meaning my brother's family, is not acquainted with. But then I have a map in my own home. So then this is something that my children that I don't have would see every day because I have it, for example. Is to maintain consistent tone and style. Just because once you identify your audience, then again, you can keep the same tone and style because the people, I mean, your audience doesn't really change in that sense. When it comes to audio and video guides, and this is something a bit more specific again with museums, this is something that we do a lot. Is well, audio guides and video guides are the provision of guides that are either audio or video, and video means in sign language. The script should use direct and user-friendly language that is for the benefit of the translation to sign language, but also, generally speaking, for anyone visiting the place of culture or the museum. Sign language versions with subtitles is something that we use, for example, in video guides, and then periodically review and update to address evolving needs. Something that was designed or done 10 years ago, these days needs to be redone. So 10 years is a good sort of like indication of how things evolve recently. I was looking at today at was a reel on what's it called, the statue. I think it was a statue of David doing a dance, which is something that 2 years ago the first sort of like formats of artificial intelligence was doing, and how to do it now. So 2 years ago, artificial intelligence was that, and this day it does that. And this is only 2 years. AI is a very rapidly evolving field. So I guess it changes every 6 months or even less than that. Something that is not as fast as AI is still perhaps not applicable, or perhaps needs to be reviewed or reconsidered after a few years. It's, I guess, the same thing with everything. You buy a nice sofa today, and then in 10 years' time, that color is not really fashionable anymore, or then you think that there's something not nice, and then you want to change it. Whenever you're doing renovation in your house, just because if you bought it from someone from the 60s, it was very fashionable at the time, but these days, no one would like a kitchen this, with the tiles of the 60s, for example. Just because things evolve. For the video production and the editing basics, we just use a clear background with good lighting for any sign language interpreter. And that's again something that everybody has been doing. Well, there's also certain specific things, like for example, if the interpreter has light skin of tone, skin tone, and use a black background. If there are people of color, if they're black, then black against black is not really ideal. So then use a contrast with that. And place the interpreter appropriately for visibility. That also goes for on-site events, for example. If you have a hearing person delivering a speech and then you put the interpreter on the side or something that is not really accessible to deaf people who are in the audience. Keep videos that are concise, usually under 7 minutes, but that's not only for deaf people, but generally speaking for everyone who wants to watch something that is very long, very specific, very detailed when you're going around a museum. It just gets boring. Anyway, subtitles and quality control, of course, is to manually create subtitles to ensure accuracy. I come from a background in subtitles. That's the only way to do subtitles is manually or with the supervision of a human being. Of course, there's a high contrast text for better visibility. So using either a background or a box or having a contrast between usually black, white against black. And then have a test final videos with diverse user groups. Because usually we think of again, specifically for videos for deaf people, capital D, meaning people who identify as deaf, and then they use sign languages, but then perhaps subtitles is something that people prefer. And there are people who are also deaf with low vision, not deaf blind. And there are people who are deaf who will also or have cognitive disabilities. So they're different people. In conclusion, accessibility expands physical, digital, linguistic, and economic spheres. And this is something of the few that I've sort of like encountered. If you ask an accessibility consultant who comes from a background in medicine, in architecture, I will tell you, it will give you the same presentation, the same talk from a different angle, just because they are from that background and they've experienced that medicine is very much related to, I don't know, ethics. And ethics is very much related to something else. Whereas from my background is languages, which is related to accessibility studies and, well, in my case, deaf studies, and also disability studies, linguistics, and everything else. One of my dreams was to become an architect when I was younger. Did not become an architect, but then the things that I'm doing these days with relation to architecture, design for all, are very much in line with what I wanted to do when I was a kid. And I always thought like, okay, well, didn't become an architect, I became something else. Still like it, and I'm okay with that. But then again, this is something that sort of like I can bring in, or anyone can bring in if they are sort of like, if they see accessibility as a lens, and then they consider the fact that it's very much an interdisciplinary approach. To implement quick fixes now while planning for ongoing improvement is something that sort of like gives you, of course, the short answer to things. And that's only good or valid if you're planning for ongoing improvements. If you're having a quick fix just to check a box, accessibility, then don't do it. I guess if you're here today and if we do what we do within the network or what you do, generally speaking, during your days, this is something that you're already aware of and you don't really do that. Engage with disability communities for real feedback, and then the communities should also be the ones of promoting and proposing and suggesting things that other people can implement as well. Just because anyone, doesn't have the necessary skills or means to do something, we create a network, which is what we do, or what we have done, that we sort of like leverage on other people specificities. If you don't know much about blind, but you know very much about deaf, then you can always ask your partner, who is the blind institute of your city, for example, for a collaboration. As long as there's a minimum so like connector between all of you or all of us, which I know that there is, we can work together to do something. And then again, the collaboration with different people who have different approaches towards something is also very useful, because we are very much, I don't know if you are like me, a bit more intellectual, a bit more linguistic, but then when you also need practical people, and the practical people are the one actually do things. I'm also practical, but then there are people a bit more practical than me. And then again, keep evolving as law, technologies, and user expectation changes. The user expectation is something I've added on this slide as well, just because what we think or what they think can change, and can change over time, and then there should be an adaptation to what it really means in terms of those providing services. Because if the expectation is to bring the expectation before was to bring in again from 2 to 6, so to provide the basic things. Now the expectation is from 6 to 10, and then I'm sure, I don't know if it's possible, there are numbers, there are numbers over 10, and then we want to do more than that. And I ask if there are any questions, or if you'd like me to delve on something else. If not, I thank you.
Oh, Gabriele, thank you very much.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank Instituto del Sordi team that they proposed those topics. And I really appreciate your involvement, and that you accepted to lead this webinar and to present such an interesting things. For me, I for sure increased my knowledge on the topic of accessibility. There were very interesting things. I also making some notes for myself. So really, really appreciate. I don't know if someone has some questions. I could see that Sylvia is.
I don't have a question. I have a comment. Gabriel, thank you very much. Definitely,
Thank you,
Gabriel, and the team of Instituto de Sordi. Now I see almost all of you here. Frankly, I was thinking about accessibility, and I think that the majority of us started with the topic of accessibility, many years ago. And then I was thinking, okay, if he's going to talk about this, and you cover this topic, and then you covered another topic, and then almost all of the things that we have done, for example, remember Maya is here, Instituto de Sordi is here, that we have discussed in the COSMO project about accessibility for all in the museums. We're here. Very complete, very full, very detailed presentation. For me, for example, would be also interesting to have some, let's say, specific examples. If you're talking about the museum, it would be interesting to see something, or to have an idea of what museum you are talking about. But in general, thank you very much. Very detailed presentation, and your personality. You say, okay, definitely, you can access the topic of accessibility from different perspectives, through different prisms, but your personal approach, your personal commitment and dedication made it very active participants. We were here, okay, some of us were making notes, the rest is following you. But it was very attractive and engaging way that you made this presentation. Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you very much. I will send you some examples of museums, if you like, for sure. Or like very specific museums. They're more related to the museums I have studied in Italy. So then the slides or the examples are in Italian. but they're applicable to any sort of like museum, so especially Spain.
I would like to take to say my personal life, but also for my personal issue. So I'll appreciate if it's possible, and if you have some materials and resources about children with dyslexia, and if you send me to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can also, I really appreciate it. Complimenti, quindi, bravissimo.
Yeah, thank you.
And I really like, the other perspective that we are talking a lot about ableism and not at all about disability. And you mentioned also, that we actually, colonize, the people with disabilities. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The accessibility these days is also like having conversation with colonial studies a lot, and as you know, exactly. So then there's a lot of resemblance. I make a point of some of the things that I either write or say. If you swap the word, like whenever there's a text on subtitles for the deaf and the hard of hearing, of course, the word, I mean, even today, the word accessibility repeated hundreds of times. If you remove or if you swap the word deaf with gay, for example, does the argument still stand? It does. If it does, then you can see similarities between an oppressed community and another oppressed community. They don't have disabilities. Numerically speaking, more or less, it's the same thing we're saying about women.
Yes.
Technically speaking, or statistically, you're not a minority, but then you understand everything else.
For example, depending on the socioeconomic background, it's totally different. I don't know, for example, to be Portuguese, to be a white woman of middle socioeconomic class with a disability, for example, and the different one, African American, as you can understand, from a low socioeconomic background, also being part of the LGBTQA plus community. Yes, it's totally different, totally
And
agree.
it's the same thing whenever they say, "Oh, London is the villa, like has the best practice and the best examples of accessibility are in London." I understand that. I appreciate it. I used to live in London. It was great. However, they have money and they have legislations and they have a government to support them. So it's easy to do things easier, not easy, to do things when you have money. When you don't have money, I would like to see an example of a rural place in Sardinia that has been given like a really good example. In Greece or any countries that doesn't really have, it's not very rich, let's say, and how to do it, because these are the ones that, of course, deserve a better credit, because doing things like that or in certain places or in certain areas is more difficult.
Okay. Is there any more questions, comments? If not, I would like to take the advantages and to let you know that till the end of the year, we are trying, and I hope we will, organize 4 more webinars. 2 of them are already set as a date and time. Next one is 21st of May, 11 CET, and 17th of June, 9:30 CET. The topics, the first one will be artificial intelligence, but here, because last year Anna from Dom Spain organized such a webinar, Generative Artificial Intelligence. So it will be not a repeated webinar, but it will be something in advance. So we would like to invite all of you, and we will share a leaflet, a Zoom to register, and etc. next week. So in order to have time till 21st of May to register and to participate, but book your time in the agenda. It's 11 set from now. And 17th of June, the topic is green skills. It will be led by TUAS University from the Netherlands. So I think it will be also very interesting. And what else? Some of the participants asked me for a certificate. So yes, there will be certificates. we will do them and send to each of you next week. Happy Easter to all of you. Thank you for your time. The webinar will be uploaded in Let Her In website. And we were live in Facebook, so yes, and we will send you the presentation, I think, again next week, because we would like also to rest. So happy Easter, everyone, and
Happy Easter.
keep touch.
Thank you very much.
Happy Easter.
Maya.
Bye.